Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Jelle, I'm a landscape architect, and we think about trees. When we talk about trees, we all have different images and reference images. If I ask you to think about trees, you all have your own image. Some go back to the kampong. Think about the trees, how they lived there. Some go back to the tree that sits next to us, next to in our park. And think about the emotion we have with that tree. Our lives have changed. I just recently moved from the Netherlands to Singapore, and I went from a single home to a 31-story apartment tower, and I now live onto the 15th floor. So my life has changed from walking out of the door into my grass and smell the seeds of flowers, but also the smell of fresh mowed grass, into a city that buzzes every day. And when you and I walk to work, we take the elevator, way too busy, we don't say good morning to everybody. We just walk into the subway and we're on our handphone and we just don't look what's around us. And then we go into the mall on our way to work and we're inside. We even work inside. We have dinner and lunch inside. So why do we spend so much money on public realm? Why do we spend so much money in planting trees? What is so important about that? Well, our life has changed. We're 24/7 available for everybody. It goes from social media to what we read into the newspaper. Studies have learned us that 30 years ago, we were able to capture 2.5 pages of text. Just think about 2.5 pages of text. Today, that has 200 times multiplied. So is it strange that so now and then we have this moment of, I don't know it anymore. I'm tired. I sense there's a sense of fatigue. And many studies have learned us that to get away from this moment of fatigue, we think about great spaces. And in many of those great spaces, we think about that one specific tree. It's the tree where we first kissed. It's the first tree where I met my wife there. It's the place where I carved our names into a tree. Am I allowed to do that? No, of course not. But hey, well, I just did it. So, in a way, we have an emotional connection towards nature, towards this tree. There's one big thing about trees, is when you and I plant them, we plant them small. And so this park has to grow. It starts with a simple tree, and over many, many years, it becomes this lush environment where you go back to and where you sit into the grass and you look up and you see a snake, a bird. You hear this, you smell the grass, you feel the leaves falling off a tree when there's seasons, of course. So in a way, a tree, and the context it stands in, is just a symbol of time. It takes time to grow, and sometimes this tree is connected to that place and helps you. So there's no more need to tell that trees are important in our life. In Singapore, trees are important. If they even have their own page into a guidebook, then you know trees are important into Singapore. Is this new? Not at all. Our former founding minister-president started in 1963 with planting the first tree on Forest Square. Did he do that because he loved trees? Probably, but he had a bigger thinking about that. He was thinking about how can I make sure that Singapore has this great place to come to only from an economical point of view. He changed the strategy from being an economical place, a hub, to if Singapore becomes clean and green, then we reinforce our status as a place within Asia. Throughout the many years, we've been planting trees. We've been cultivating these trees. We've been maintaining these trees. Not only from a government point of view, but also you as the community. You took ownership of these trees, and you're proud to say we are the greenest city within Asia. Planting trees is a very simple thing. Planting trees is a balancing act, especially into a place like Singapore. You need to think about the species of the tree. We need to think about the maintenance of this tree. We need to think about the place it grows in, the soil, the medium, the water it gets. All of this to make sure that we've got this manicured city to retreat in, so that you and I can actually go to the park and just enjoy that feeling of getting away from the bus and the hustle of everyday life. So in a way, the term, the city in a garden or the garden in a city, whatever you want to call it, is great for Singapore. But what is the next step? Where do we go from now on? Singapore will continue to grow, and a lot of people think that the growth can be represented and shown into how beautiful architecture is. Look at the Marina Bay and how architecture is just there. Buildings are showing how beautiful and modern the city of Singapore is. We as landscape architects think a little bit different, and we think about the context we're in. Look at the building we are in today. Look at what is outside. There's a combination of architecture, urban design, landscape, water, green, ecologically, snakes as well. There is something there, and we think and we believe in an ecosystem that holds all of these elements together. Rather than thinking 2D, which happens in a lot of countries around us, the city of Singapore is thinking 3-dimensional. It's thinking about where do we plant that tree and what is the size of it? Where do we park our tree? How high is the building? But it also thinks about how can we bring that green and that tree closer to us. Nothing new. A lot of architects are already along on this, and they're thinking about how can we bring trees closer to you? How can we bring trees at the elevations? Having sky gardens and roof gardens at the 30th floor is nothing new. It's already there. There's one thing that is lacking to us. We believe that there's a fundamental problem there. Green is just for decorative purpose. There's no ecology system behind it. There's nothing that says, here I am grounded within the place. At the 30th floor, there is no bee, there is no butterfly, there is no bird that whispers and says good morning to you when you open your front door. So we hope that we can think about this third dimension, bringing it up from the earth all the way until the top. And what does that mean? Again, this is something that is growing for many years. And in many years, we've been thinking about how do we go from the bottom all the way till the top? How do we reconnect this emotional connection to nature, and how do we redefine that? Just imagine, you're at the 12th floor, you open your window, and instead of hearing the bustle and the hustle of the city below you, the cars, the train, the airplane that flies over, you open the window and what you hear are bees, you see butterflies, you see the layers of trees. And you think about how does that influence my life on a daily basis. Layered over layered of trees and green connected as one system. We believe in this project, and together with colleagues architects, we defined Kampung Admiralty. And Kampung Admiralty in its project is a small village on its own where you connect people with the place they are in, their everyday life, and we connect them with the park. This building has everything in it, from a parking garage to an MRT station to a medical center. You live there, you recreate in it, but you also have this garden in it. And this garden is publicly accessible for everybody. This garden is this lush environment for water, for trees, for you and I to recreate in, to play in, and to reconnect ourselves with nature. Nature is a great word, but what if you also make sure that it is sustainable by water, but also by eatable fruit, by having the possibility to harvest that piece of vegetable and take it with you into your garden or into your kitchen. And you do that from the bottom up. You allow people to walk in, to connect with that green, to touch that green and take it with them back home. That's how we believe that you reconnect with nature, on the block itself. Now, the city exists out of multiple blocks, and together that forms a new neighborhood. Bidadari is for many of you a historical place with a beautiful nature, beautiful trees, ground covers you go into. There's a heritage in it. This place has been retransformed into a place where people will be living. HDBs are currently bumping out of the ground as mushrooms. And as part of this thinking about new city building, we had to think about that landscape we're in. How do we make sure that that existing landscape where we love to go to is reconnecting ourselves, is bringing new cultures, bringing new identities so that we can live in it, so that we can recreate in it, that we can just submerge ourselves into these places. Nothing happens on its own. This is a whole system that works together, where we think about water, rainwater falls, how do we harvest it and how do we make it visible again into public landscape? It's thinking about, okay, we reduce square meters from nature, and how do we bring it back? How do we reinforce existing structures where animals and fauna and flora was living by increasing biodiversity, by adding more plants in it and making sure that this one lizard, for example, remains into this neighborhood. And we do that with planting. We do that with trees, and we create accessibility. We create paths so that you and I can enjoy being in that landscape and getting submerged into a plan that actually connects us together with Mother Nature. There's only so much we can do. The pie is only so big. We only have so many square meters within the city. Most of our thinking still happens into, here's a park, here's an HDB, and here's a street. That's because the organization from a government has been organized that way. So we have to comply to certain rules within a street, to certain rules within a park, to certain rules within a building. What if you say, let's not do this anymore? What if we stack everything on top of each other and we think as a pie that we stack on top of each other and say, look, the world gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and so we can divide the pie up in multiple ways. This is where our project Punggol District Digital District comes in. We call it PDD within the studio. So if you hear PDD, then you know it's Punggol Digital District. This is a new development on the northeast corner of the city next to Seragoon Water Reservoir. And what is happening there is that multiple clients have joined themselves into one group and saying, okay, we're going to think across the boundaries. We're going to think not in segments anymore. I do the street, you do the park, you do the building. We're going to think as one. What this does, it creates a landscape where water, greenery, smart technology, building comes together into a new environment for students who will study here, for young businesses who grow up here, who become like this startup moment, but also there's schools, there's universities, there is an MRT station, there's a hawker center, there's a hostel and a hotel is all coming, and that all is connected into one new urban district. Well, what does the landscape architect then do there again? He thinks about that tree. You remember the tree I started with? Well, we started thinking about trees and how can trees reinforce this community. And we designed a promenade that will run from the heart of Punggol Digital District towards the waterfront. And it creates this lush environment for you and I to live in, to connect in, to go to meet each other, to have lunch in, to just enjoy that moment, to breathe. So if we're done with working or we have a lunch break, instead of going into the hawker center down into -2, we go outside, we sit outside, we enjoy the environment that we're living in, and that we do along a long stretch. There is more. We also think about the green spaces inside the building. Green spaces inside the building help us to create natural air. We see the sun, we can breathe, but it also takes us away from the daily stress we have in an office space. So we go into the green and we relax. And so the multiple buildings within this development have multiple layers of green in it that allow you to reconnect, to breathe, and to get that air and sunlight that we need and deserve throughout the day. That's the way we think within our studio about landscape architecture and trees in a way. We see them as a 3D development, an intersection of multiple layers laying on top of each other. And that creates landscapes. Landscapes that you and I can recreate in, where fauna and flora and we coexist next to each other, where we meet each other, where we are able to research again, where do we come from, where do we go to, but also it helps us thinking about, You know what? It was a busy day today. I just want to sit with my feet into the water, and I'm fine with that. Think about that tree again. The tree doesn't have to be in a far memory or in an idea or in a dream, but it can be outside your door, and it's connected within an ecosystem that allows us to be who we are. Thank you.